Today I'm going to show you an action thriller film titled Black Lotus. Be ready for spoilers ahead. The movie kicks off during a concert rehearsal disrupted by a group of armed men. Matteo and his friend John are part of a tactical team sent to rescue the musicians. The situation escalates when the criminals record a demand for €300 million, accompanied by a demonstration of dire consequences if their demand isn't met. Matteo realizes they aren't bluffing and disobeys John's direct orders to act prematurely. He successfully takes down the criminals, but his impulsive actions result in the loss of John's life. 5 years later, Matteo finds himself in Romania with a completely different job and a reluctance to socialize with his co-workers. Most evenings are spent reminiscing about John and the happy family that outlived him. His wife, Helen, is likely unaware of the circumstances. Matteo eventually decides to set things straight. He quits his job in the morning and boards a train to Amsterdam and stumbles upon a major Interpol operation at the docks. Apparently, two criminal organizations, the Syndicate and the Consociation, are now collaborating, which Agent Shearer recognizes as a bad sign. Though the shipment initially appears to contain just ordinary cereal boxes, Agent Fisher discovers a suspicious package inside one of them, suggesting someone is taking their morning routine rather seriously. A thug insults Shearer in a foreign language, judging by Agent Fisher's reaction. The thug then spits on Fisher's shoe and is taken aside for a discussion. Burr, a loyal member of the Consociation, discreetly photographs the agents from afar. He receives a call from the big boss, Gabriel Sabin, and reports the lost shipment. Burr finds it peculiar that Interpol was already waiting for them, indicating insider knowledge. The foul-mouthed individual is actually an informant named Roman, who has been supplying information to the agents. The shoe incident was staged to facilitate communication. Roman predicts both the Syndicate and the Consociation will be on edge, and someone is bound to make a mistake. The scene shifts to a guy named Paul at PW Investments attempting to convince folks to invest in crypto, not because he believes in its potential. He's persuading people to make the same mistake he did so he can use their money to cover his losses. Meanwhile, Matteo is summoning his courage at Helen's doorstep. The little girl who answers the door is John's daughter, Angie. She's very social, and her first question is about broccoli. She's curious if he really loved it. Matteo tells the truth, unintentionally revealing her mom's lie about it. Helen, who is now married to Paul, is happy to see her old friend Matteo but also resents him for being absent for so long. He didn't even attend the funeral and wasn't there when she needed support the most. Matteo starts to explain his absence and attempts to tell her how John died, but she refuses to listen and gets upset with him for bringing it up. Matteo apologizes and leaves, but Helen sees him standing outside with a sorrowful expression and feels bad. She offers him the guest room for a while, at least until he figures out his next step. Matteo accepts, but only plans to stay for the night. Helen also shows him some of John's belongings she had kept for no particular reason, hoping that Matteo might want to keep some as mementos. In the evening, Helen's husband Paul asks her about the large man sitting in the tiny chair outside, and Helen explains the situation to him. They decide to let him stay for a few days. Predictably, that small chair eventually gives way under the weight of his misery, and Matteo moves to a bench, where he starts to reminisce about a flashback in Afghanistan with old friend John. They're discussing a girl from the neighborhood and a party they attended. John dropped the bombshell that his wife Helen was pregnant with Angie. Fast forward to the present day, Angie tells her mom she likes their new guest, noting that he seems very lonely and in need of a new friend. Paul joins Matteo for a beer, but neither of them is in a very talkative mood. Matteo isn't very open about his soldiering adventures, only mentioning how much he misses the peaceful Afghan sky. Paul goes back inside after a few minutes and informs Helen that the Matteo is damaged. Instead of getting upset, she laughs and asks if Paul is feeling intimidated. Paul tries to sound cool and collected but doesn't fool her. Helen reassures him that he has nothing to worry about, not her war hero husband nor the enigmatic Matteo downstairs. The next morning, Matteo discovers that Angie left him a heartfelt note on the door, asking him not to leave without saying goodbye, so he decides to stay a bit longer. He borrows some of John's clothes to go jogging. When he returns, he finds Angie is leaving for school. She asks him to take care of her dog and mentions they'll have another tea party that evening. Meanwhile, Paul at his workplace gets an unexpected visitor and client, Gabriel Sabin. Paul straightforwardly asked why Gabriel had to come in person. Sabin explained that he was concerned about €15 million that had mysteriously disappeared from his account. Paul, frantically clicking and scrolling on his computer, attempted to bury Gabriel in technical jargon, blaming it on a software glitch interfering with real-time transactions. He claimed the money was there but that Gabriel couldn't see it. However, Paul swore to have it fixed by tomorrow, and Gabriel reluctantly believed him, knowing the alternative was too absurd. As they left in a car, Sabin grumbled about Interpol's interference, finding it incredibly irritating when you're trying to maintain an honest career as a drug lord. Meanwhile, in the background, Roman, the informant, happened to be nearby, innocently engrossed in his phone from an odd angle. No one suspected him of photographing the gangsters or anything of the sort. He was too focused on his task to notice that he had his own tail. Days passed, and Matteo found himself repeatedly roped into staying longer. This was evident when he began building a treehouse for Angie. Helen questioned whether he was genuinely occupied or if he was avoiding slowing down. She also teased him about his tattoos, pointing out that he and John had always made an effort to appear tough, a fact she was now acutely aware of due to her current husband's completely different demeanor. Paul wore a peculiar expression on his face one evening. Helen noted that he seemed distant and had ignored Angie during dinner, attributing it to work-related stress. The next day, a group of excited travelers had their tour disrupted by Roman, who was found hanging from a picturesque bridge. Gabriel called Mr. Burr with the news, but he remained uneasy. It felt like too much of a coincidence that they had a traitor in their midst, and his money had vanished from Paul's investments company. While the agents were grappling with this shocking revelation, they began to recognize someone among them, their informant Roman. Paul sat at his office, glued to the news, witnessing the collapse of a new cryptocurrency. From Paul's one-sided conversation with the TV screen, it became apparent what had transpired. He had made an ill-fated choice in cryptocurrency investments, using money that belonged to the wrong client. He phoned Gabriel, spinning a pitiable story about the glitch being more complicated than anticipated. Gabriel didn't bother yelling. Instead, he dispatched a few of his men to resolve the situation. Meanwhile, Shira and Fisher discussed the fate of their informant, recognizing that such a dramatic disposal was undoubtedly a message from the gangsters. Roman's phone began to ring just in time for Face ID to unlock it, but it was too late to answer. Shira decided she would take the call and relay it to Naomi. Later at home, Helen noticed Angie playing with Matteo while her husband was on the phone. Paul informed her that he would be working late that evening. He then switched phones and called Roman, leaving a message stating that he was prepared to negotiate. The next day, Helen suggested to Matteo that he should extend his stay, as John would have been happy to see Matteo and Angie bonding. But just as things seemed better, a sudden and strange attack happened. 4 masked people with bats ambushed Matteo. Angie, showing incredible bravery, rushed to protect him. One of the attackers, however, remained cold-hearted and faced swift retribution. It became clear that Angie was the real target all along and attacking Matteo was just a diversion. They took Angie and fled in a car, leaving Helen and Matteo behind. Matteo got up and took a nearby bike and pursued them. Helen called her husband to report Angie's kidnapping, and he promptly reached out to Gabriel, though Gabriel wasn't in the mood to talk. Matteo eventually abandoned the bike and hopped onto the roof of one of the cars. When he realized that Angie wasn't in this particular vehicle, he began to extract each thug one by one. The pursuit continued until they eventually crashed. Matteo awoke in the hospital, handcuffed to the bed, while Helen argued with a police officer in the hallway since Angie remained missing. Shira and her partner arrive as Matteo attempts to leave, dragging the bed along with him, but he couldn't pass it through the door. The agents decide to unlock the cuffs, but Shira has some questions about Matteo. There isn't much information on him, and most of what's available is heavily redacted, which raises concerns. Some of the individuals he removed from the car were associated with the consociation, and she describes it as the pinnacle of criminal organizations led by Gabriel. Paul maintains a poker face and even asks a couple of questions. Shira notes that this situation doesn't fit their usual profile, as they typically abduct teen girls, but this seems more personal. She offers Matteo her business card, to which Fisher responds by suggesting it's the number to call when he's about to commit a foolish act. Unbeknownst to them, one of Gabriel's men had been there the whole time. At the moment, Angie finds comfort in the company of a nightclub worker. Gabriel assures her that she'll be back home soon and tries to downplay her distress. However, his conversation with Burr reveals a different plan as they contemplate what to do with her, including the possibility of selling her to an international gang. Determined to locate Angie, Matteo asks Helen for the code to open John's briefcase. Paul intervenes, suggesting that these individuals are too dangerous and they should leave it to Interpol. Inadvertently, he says more than he should have, and Matteo quickly picks up on his suspicion. Helen is initially shocked by the accusation, but her shock turns to horror when she realizes that Matteo is right. Paul eventually confesses to everything and admits that there's no way they can engage in a conflict with these people. Matteo insists that Paul call Gabriel and tell him that he has the money they're looking for. They arranged a meeting at a Westport construction site, suspecting a trap. Gabriel had one of his men handle whoever might come. Burr comforted Angie about what's going to happen to her parents, sharing his own orphaned past. The nightclub worker comforted Angie until he left. Detective Shira provided updates to Fisher through Naomi, who had access to Roman's phone. Paul was interested in negotiating and seeking immunity based on hints of incriminating information. Shira told Fisher to watch the family. Helen offered him coffee and casually mentioned that Paul was upstairs, demonstrating her indifference to his fate in jail. At the agreed meeting spot, the mercenary leader mocked Matteo, asserting there was no exchange. The agreement was not to harm the girl. He suggested a foreign prince would make her a princess. It became clear the bag held no money and the contents were exposed when a bomb went off. Matteo saved a survivor and had a friendly chat until he disclosed Angie's location. Helen's agent, Fisher, suspected Paul's reluctance to be arrested. At that moment, Gabriel's man attacked Fisher, and despite Helen's attempts to intervene, Fisher succumbed to his injuries. Later, Paul left with a heavy bag, only to find Gabriel's mercenary in the back seat. Paul offered half the cash, but the guy took it all without a word. Matteo signaled Detective Shira with a call, indicating a risky move. She offered to join, and they both reached Gabriel's nightclub, clearing a path to the offices by defeating obstacles. They found the nightclub worker crying, who directed them without hesitation. On the rooftop, Burr and other mercenaries faced Shira and Matteo in a brutal fight as Gabriel guided Angie downstairs. Burr and other criminal lives ended abruptly. Only the boss remained. Angie attempted to flee, but Gabriel fired a shot, frightening her into stepping forward. Matteo caught up with him, and despite the odds, the knife prevailed. Gabriel fell on the ground, and Matteo rescued Angie, who remarkably stayed unharmed. 6 months later, we see Angie thriving to the extent that her dog even had a puppy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.